The episode that you are about to listen to was recorded last night, Thursday, August 1st. As such, it will not talk about any of the news that has come out regarding Game Informer. In case you missed it, we were notified Friday morning, August 2nd, that GameStop, effective immediately, was closing down Game Informer and the entire staff is unemployed. Um, it goes without saying that this is a heartbreaking turn of events. I've worked at Game Informer 9 years and 8 months, almost a decade. Um, During that time, it has enabled me through the amazing folks at Game Informer to literally travel the world. This year alone, I've gone to Sweden, Poland, and Japan, and I was able to do my dream job full time. I was able to create a magazine that I grew up reading and work with people that I love to the ends of the earth. This all while, kind of flying by the seat of our pants, doing everything that we could to make the best magazine we could with an incredibly small staff. You look at our staff numbers and compare it to some of the other major outlets, and it was not even comparable. Because of that, we were all always so busy and working so hard, but we loved it so much, and we poured our heart and soul into that magazine every single month, and that website every single day, and that podcast every single week. And to have, I did not anticipate my Friday morning would be going to get coffee with another coworker who had a day off, and then we receive a meeting invite saying that we needed to jump on a Microsoft Teams call. And that's heartbreaking. That's the only way to put it. I just wanted to provide this preamble before the episode starts in earnest, just with to kind of contextualize the fact that the episode you're about to listen to has a more upbeat tone than I would probably have if I were to record this episode now. Um, and of course, we do talk about the state of the industry and layoffs that are happening around the industry without the future sight of what was about to happen to Game Informer. And in case you're not familiar with Game Informer, you found this podcast through other means. 33 years this magazine's been around, and I was with it for almost 10 years. And I'm sure I'll look back on them as some of the greatest years of my life. And it's the fact that one of my favorite publications that I grew up reading just no longer exists is just extra salt in the wound on top of the devastating news that I, alongside so many of the people that I love, no longer have our livelihoods and the ability to work together on this thing that we all love doing. It's it's distressing, to say the least. Um, but with that in mind, I do want to extend the most heartfelt of thanks to everybody who has listened to this podcast, which is still going to continue, by the way. I'm even more glad that starting in April, I decided to take this podcast independent, because had that not been the case, I would no longer have access to the feed. I would no longer have access to the name. I would no longer have access to anything. So all things Nintendo is going to continue. In fact, it might even ramp up faster than I anticipated. But just from the bottom of my heart, thank you to everybody who has reached out with their support in response to this news. Thank you so much to everybody who has listened to this podcast and continues to listen to this podcast. you know, it rolls on. The show is going to continue. Um, and I'm just grateful to have this outlet to communicate with everybody now that, my main way in which I've communicated with everybody is taken away from me. So truly, thank you so much. I guess we're going to transition to the episode now. Glad I don't have to do the episode in this current headspace. But I guess you'll get to hear me introduce myself as Brian Shea from Game Informer one last time. But if you want to continue to support this podcast and my work as best you can, find All Things Nintendo on Patreon. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Now that I have a little bit of extra free time on my hands, maybe we'll do some more cool stuff through those avenues. But for now, we're going to send it over to the episode. Thank you all again so much. I cannot begin to express accurately how much you all mean to me and the continuing support of my work here on the All Things Nintendo podcast, and everybody who supported Game Informer during its run. Rest in peace to one of the greatest eras of my life. But looking forward to the next thing, and I'm sure I'll have more news to share in the coming days and weeks, either on the Patreon or on my social media. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and I'll talk to you next week. Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea from Game Informer, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. I am back from Japan, and I'm finally caught up on my sleep. But that means we are finally going to have a timely episode this week, which means we'll be able to catch up on all the news. And then in the second segment, I'll be giving my thoughts on a new game that is coming to Switch next week, SteamWorld Heist 2. And then my guest is going to be running down her usual gamut of all kinds of indie games that she specializes in. And that guest is none other than former Game Informer editor and the founder of Indie Informer. It is the Indie Informer herself, Jill Grodt. Jill, how are you? I'm
good. I was waiting to see how you're going to finish running down the gamut of, because I'm like, just pure foolishness is really how you could end that sentence. So many indie games, like essentially, I don't know if anybody knows how this show kind of works and getting all put together, but Shea reached out to me and was like, hey, do you want to be on the show? But like, he didn't ask in that way. He was like, hey, what are your thoughts on SteamWorld Heist 2? I'm like, they're not okay. Maybe that's a spoiler. I won't say that. It didn't start out well, I was assured that Shea was going to be like, well, never mind, you don't get to be on the show then. But no, he let me on.
No, I just wanted somebody to talk about this game with me, and I was like, who probably has been checking this game out? Jill Grodt, because this is a high-profile indie title.
100%.
That's going to be one of the headliners of the main segment of this show. It's going to be a two-segment show because we have our traditional rundown of all the latest indies that have come to Switch, which we always do every time we have you on the show. But we're going to start off with a little bit of news.
It's sort of my fault. I sort of insist on you doing that whenever I come on. I'm like, and then I want to talk about this, and then I want to talk about this, and you're just gracious enough to let me.
Oh, I'm always going to let my own personal indie Sherpa come on the show, and I'll have my eShop wish list on my second monitor, so I can be 100% ready to add like 7 games to it.
Get ready.
Yeah, because originally I was like, hey, do you want to just come on and talk SteamWorld Heist 2 and another game that we're going to be talking about, Shea. I'm assuming that's how it's pronounced. We're going to go with that.
We've decided that's how we're going to go.
But then you're like, oh, I also want to talk about these 7 other games. And I'm like, okay.
And I just kept posting.
I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to deny it. But Jill, we used to have a tradition. I don't know if you remember this from way back when this show was under the Game Informer umbrella, where we would start each episode with Pokemon news, because there was always Pokemon news, like no matter what, because I feel like when I started this show, Pokemon was firing on all cylinders. We were getting like new game after new game, remakes, spin-offs, everything. But it has been kind of dry lately, and I've kind of like, abandoned that tradition of starting the show with Pokemon news. But we do have two pieces of Pokemon news to start off with here.
Ooh.
And first up, one of my longest standing criticisms, which dates back to 2019 when I visited Game Freak, which, by the way, when I was out in Japan last week, I just happened to be in the neighborhood of where Game Freak's office is,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't get to go up and say hi to everybody or anything
Oh,
like
okay.
that. But
I thought that was where this was going,
I
and
did
I
go into
went
the
and it
building, went into their building because it at the foot of the building, like in the first floor or first and second floor, it's like a little mini shopping area. So I went into the bookstore that they have on the first floor of their building. So
and
that was kind of
someone
fun.
someone upstairs was like, "I sense Brian Shea is in the building
I
somewhere."
sense a presence I've not felt in some time. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because there actually is like a Pokemon section in the bookstore of the building that they're in.
That makes sense.
But yeah, that was back in 2019. So it's been a full 5 years since I've been there. But it was nice to go back. I remember that building. I have good memories in that building. But one thing that I learned when I was out at Game Freak back in 2019 was that this studio, despite being the flagship development team behind one of the largest video game properties of all time,
Mhm.
Game Freak, it is a super small team.
Oh.
Like I think it was like for console they beefed up to like 150 or 200 developers, which is nothing compared to like other AAA
Yeah.
developers for console games. So I've always been saying like, hey, they need to like really pump some money into it. And then when Scarlet and Violet came out, it kind of showed that the stubbornness of keeping the team small wasn't really working anymore.
Mhm, mhm.
And again, I stand by that game's a very fun game. It's just it
Yeah.
runs like
It's,
garbage.
yeah.
They need some people. But this comes to us via nintendolife.com that Game Freak is holding a recruitment event for mid-career
Ooh.
professionals, and there are like I want to say like 30 or 40 jobs listed, and titles like human motion, Pokemon models, cutscenes, character model effects, technical artists, 2D designers, lighting artists, all kinds of different things. So I want to ask you this, Jill. Do you think this big recruiting event signals that maybe the studio is shifting how it thinks about like the number of developers working on its games?
It's possible, you know? I mean, obviously they're beefing up in a time. I am just happy to hear of a development team building rather than cutting.
Well, that seems to
Um,
be like the trend in Japan, right? Like all these stories that we hear, and we're going to be talking about a very sad story near the tail end of this news segment. All the stories that we hear of like developers thriving come out of Japan. It's like, okay, yeah, what was it like? Capcom gave all their employees a raise last year, and
mhm,
like,
mhm.
you know, we always hear about how developers in Japan just never lay off their employees, and it's like, why are they able to do it but we're not?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I remember something about this discussion going on, and we need to reach out to Haley Rittman Max because she is an actual like video game lawyer and would
Hmm.
probably know. But I remember something about Japan laws being very strict about what you can and cannot do with layoffs. So that's a very interesting part, and perhaps bringing it back to the Nintendo news, perhaps being why that team is so small in the first place, because they don't want to get into this boom bust cycle that we have here, where you really beef up for like a big project and then you cut everybody at the end of the project. So if you have to think about if you have to think about the people who are working for you and being able to sustain them and keep them long time for a long time, then it does make sense to keep that team small. But if they think that, I mean, Pokemon is not making money. Like it is easy to understand them bringing on 40 more people to be able to beef something up, and hopefully that means good things for games in the future and we don't get another of these games that are like, oh, this is so cool but it just looks bad, you know?
Yeah, well, it's also a shift in thinking that like Japanese developers seem to have, where it's like even Nintendo has said like, why would we get rid of all this like long tenured talent and like lose all that expertise and all of that experience? Like that
Yeah.
just ends up shooting us in the foot in the long run. And it's like, yeah, that's what we've been saying all this
Hmm.
time. And it's like, because like Western developers are so beholden to like shareholders, and Japanese developers have to deal with shareholders as well.
Yeah.
It's just like there's like such an obsession with like, all right, we got to hit our numbers this
Numbers
quarter.
gotta go up. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just frustrating that there's like such a short term thinking for Western developers, it
Yeah.
seems, when compared to Japanese developers.
Also, when you called out the human motion, I imagine just being in like a Squirtle suit running around, and I'm down for that. Nintendo, if you want to, Game Freak, if you're interested, hit me up.
I can picture you in a Squirtle suit.
Oh yeah.
Is that going to be like Squirtle's
I
animation in
am
the next game?
sending that exact clip to Game Freak as we speak.
Hey, they're recruiting actively. And kind of along these same lines, the second story, I've brought up several times on this podcast how Pokemon is the highest grossing entertainment franchise on the planet. And it turns out that hasn't changed because according to a report from License Global, the Pokemon company raked in 10.8 billion with a B dollars in sales last year. And I believe that was number 7 overall in terms
Mhm.
of like licensors. I think like Disney was number 1, but like Pokemon Company beat out Mattel. Like that's a pretty heavy hitter,
Yeah.
especially like on the heels of the Barbie movie.
And then after people hear about this shop that they can go to, they're all running over to Japan to pick up all of their gear. So you
And
just included another billion at least, Shay.
exactly, another billion there. For context, though, both mainline Pokemon games also continue to sell well on the Switch. Pokemon Sword and Shield is currently sitting at number 6 on the Switch bestsellers list, and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is right behind it at number 7. Both of those generations have sold more than 25 million copies each.
Mm.
And then, the trading card game, the anime, and other merchandise remain super popular. I mean, when I was out in Japan, there's like several Pokemon centers that you can just go to, and it's just all Pokemon store, like Pokemon merchandise. It's incredible.
I would love to check it out. I cannot lie and say that I got so into the 151, the last 151 set, that I was just like, I was burning through packs, and I was
Yeah.
back in my childhood opening things up and getting so excited that I got like a Squirtle. I'm like, yes. It was good times,
So the one that got me back into it was Pokemon XY Evolutions, and I don't
Mhm.
know if you know that one. I actually tweeted out, like, this was probably like 2018, 2019. I don't know when that set came out, but I was like, man, I wish they would just reprint like all of like the original Pokemon cards, because
Yeah.
like I want to get them back, because I you know I got rid of all of them when I was a kid,
Yeah.
which was the dumbest decision I ever made, because they're all worth like thousands of dollars now.
They're sitting
And
somewhere in various cousins' basements
uh
somewhere, and
so I tweeted that out, and somebody was like, "Oh, check out XY Evolutions that just came out not too long ago. It's reprints of all the original cards." So I
yeah.
actually bought like a booster box of that, which has 36 booster packs, and then like
Which
the
at the
Elite Trainer thing.
time was probably fairly reasonable, but, like, if you look now at how much it is to buy one of those right now
Hmm.
because it's so popular, I'm like, I can't, reason myself into doing that just yet.
Oh, you're talking about specifically about XY Evolutions?
Yeah.
Oh, let's check that out,
Go
because
right on ahead. You
one
look
of
at
my
those
favorite
numbers.
sets ever, because of that very reason. Oh God, let's see. I found it. eBay.
Mhm.
Okay, so XY Evolution's booster box, not as high as I thought it would be. $250 new, which
It's
is like double the MSRP.
okay, yeah, okay. I
I'm just
can't I
saying,
can't be
I'm not
like,
saying it's
"Okay, I'm good."
justifiable. I'm saying it's lower than I thought it would be, given like how much Pokemon trading card game has skyrocketed in the time
Right.
since.
Mhm.
Which, by the way, that's the set that got me back in. Now I
Yeah.
have binders upon binders of Pokemon cards, and it's all thanks to that set.
This is all gonna devolve into you and me go getting our binders and, like, comparing
We're gonna
cards at this
trade.
point.
When I was in Japan, by the way, my plan next week, I'll have a programming note at the end of here, but my plan next week is to do story time for my trip out to Japan, because there's so much like gaming and Nintendo related stuff.
Mhm.
So we'll see if that all coalesces into part of an episode. Um, but yeah, Pokemon merchandise remains super popular. But 2024 is actually the first year in a while that the series hasn't had like a major gaming release. And Jill, I know you're not a sales forecaster, nor am I, but do you think that the number goes down a little when the same report is run next year for that reason?
Possibly. I think also I am interested in how not just Pokemon, but all of kind of the Switch ecosystem, like eventually, Shay, I know everyone's been talking about it. Eventually, the Switch 2 is gonna be out there. We're gonna know about it. We're gonna know what's going on with it. And inevitably, whenever we get that official announcement, sales are going to start dropping because no one wants to buy the old stuff. Everyone wants to buy something new. So it depends on if it's coming out. Wouldn't that be amazing if there was a new Pokemon game as one of the launch titles for the Switch 2?
Well, there is
Like,
Pokemon Legends ZA that's coming early 2025.
do we think that? No, that's way too early. That's way
I
too
mean, I
early.
think early 2025 is the window. Let's see. Does Pokemon Legends ZA
I
even
mean,
have?
I don't want to freak you out, Shay, but it's August
I know.
today.
And we didn't get like our first full reveal of the Switch until a couple months before it came out.
I believe, you're correct. You're absolutely correct. Nintendo does Nintendo things. And
Actually, it does. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page for Pokemon Legends ZA.
mhm,
It's just 2025. It's not early 2025.
interesting.
I think I remember them saying early 2025, but maybe I'm wrong.
So, just to reiterate, you think the Switch 2 is possibly coming next year?
Oh, it's absolutely coming next year. I would
Ooh.
be shocked if it's not. I mean, Nintendo's already said as much. Basically, they said like they even called it like Switch next model, and they're like, it's gonna be coming next year.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I mean, I think it's all but locked in. I would be shocked if we don't get it before like Summer Game Fest timeframe.
Of next year. I'm going to
Yeah.
hold you to it. And if it doesn't happen, I will blame you personally.
Yes, please do. No, but that I would be very surprised if we don't get it before like the end of the first half of next year.
Okay.
I think we're going to hear about the early details before 2024 is over. And if
Ready?
not then maybe it'll be like the February Nintendo Direct that they've traditionally done that they skipped this year will be like a Switch reveal or Switch 2 reveal Direct.
Mm.
That's my
Okay.
prediction anyway.
Okay. I love it. I love the enthusiasm.
So next item on the docket here, 2024 Olympic Games happening right now in Paris. Jill, have you been watching it
It's
all?
going. I haven't. I'm like, I really should pay attention, but so many indie games to play. There's so
I
many indie
get it.
games to play. I just can't stop and watch. I mean, Simone Biles is now the most decorated gymnast ever, I think.
It's incredible. Like that entire women's gymnastics team for the U.S. is just fantastic. Obviously, Simone Biles is the anchor of that team, but like the rest of the team is fantastic. So also shout out Suni Lee, who's from St. Paul, Minnesota.
Ooh,
Yeah.
you
So
guys did it. Congrats.
yay, Minnesota. Uh, but Jill, you may or may not have noticed we did not get a Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games this year.
Oh,
And it's the first time in several Olympic games that we did not get one.
yeah. I think France must obviously have something against Nintendo. Let's
I
start
think
this
it's
war.
the International Olympic Committee that might have something against gaming as a whole because it seems like the series might be completely done at this point. According to Lee Cocker, who I'm reading this over on NintendoLife.com once again, Lee Cocker worked on all the games in the series. There's even a picture of him with the president of the International Olympic Committee when he was pitching the first Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games.
Interesting.
According to him, the International Olympic Committee ended its partnership with Nintendo and Sega to explore different partnerships, including, wait for it, NFTs and esports.
Oh, man. I was hoping for something way cooler than that. Some sort of off-the-shelf developer or it's a series of indie games. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. But no. Okay.
Olympic story.
That's interesting. I
Is it?
That's sad to hear. I remember I think maybe the last E3 that I went to had the big stadium with a part of it being like there was rock climbing or something, and like there were all kinds of little like mini events because they were promoting the next like Olympics, I want to say.
I thought that was first Pokemon Sword and Shield because
No,
that
it
was
had
based in a
that.
stadium.
But no, 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 not that stadium. Like it was a round thing. But maybe it wasn't the last E3, but it was definitely like it had actual people rock climbing, which is what I remember happening.
I don't
And I
remember
was
that.
like, I'm not going to do that. But um yeah, that's very sad though. Cuz that's always just a silly. It's always fun when you have these 2 or 3 or however many mega icons kind of coming together to do silly things like Super Smash Brothers being obviously the best known version of this, but I really hope that nothing NFT happens. I feel like the NFT buzzword trend has kind of left us.
Yeah, it seems like AI is the current
Mhm.
hotness. So I don't know why like now is the time for them to jump on the NFT train.
Because obviously, when they were planning it, it was the big thing, and they didn't expect it to move on quite as quickly as it did.
Yeah, so I've been trying to bring up this article that for whatever reason I just could not find. So I went to another article that I knew linked to it. Um, so I actually have
Journalism.
I've asked about I asked so I had a chance in 2016, first time I ever interacted with Shigeru Miyamoto. I had a chance to ask him one question because it was
Hmm.
at the tail end of an interview that Ben Reeves was conducting for Breath of the Wild. And I sat down and I was like, I decided I was like, I'm going to ask him about Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yes.
So I asked him about like, Mario and Sonic at the Olympics and like what it was like having like Sonic and Mario finally in a game together. And this was shortly after Yuji Naka had departed Sega. And Miyamoto said, quote, I always thought it would be great to have Sonic and Mario in the same game, but if you put them in an action game, the feeling of speed is very different, so it wouldn't have worked. So that was the reason that they went with the Olympic Games because, well, here's from Takashi Iizuka and that like kind of a follow up conversation that I had. Takashi Iizuka said, quote, I started this conversation with Nintendo, and then later when Sega picked up the license for the Olympic Games video games, we had the foundation with Nintendo to say, we want to bring Sonic and Mario together and have them appear in the same world and have them compete against each other. And we're going to use the premise of it being the Olympic Games and these characters are participating in the Olympic Games together to make it happen. It was the first great conversation about getting these characters together to compete and have fun together. So it's kind of interesting to look back at these quotes and yeah, that does make sense. Like these two stables of characters have been like on the like opposite sides of, I guess you'd call them borders, and now they're coming together finally to compete in this event that like the spirit of it is people
Yeah.
from
Countries all
different
coming together.
countries are coming together to represent their side and like compete in these sports. And I think that's kind of a cool idea of making that happen.
100%. Also, your first interaction with Miyamoto is very different than my first
What
interaction
was
with
your first
Miyamoto.
interaction with Miyamoto?
I again on the E3 floor, I was almost run over by him and his entourage.
um
Whenever he goes anywhere, if anybody wants to know, on the E3 floor at least, he's surrounded completely by burly human beings who are willing to murder you if you're in the way. And I was almost in the way, but I got a picture and it was fantastic.
So yeah, I've told the story about when I interviewed Miyamoto and Koji Kondo at the Mario movie premiere,
Hmm.
and it was it's just intimidating when you walk into those rooms because they roll like 20 people deep.
Yeah.
So it's like, and Miyamoto has his entourage. Koji Kondo has a slightly smaller but still pretty intimidating entourage, and it's like I'm basically facilitating like a panel right now. This is not like an interview because there's like an audience.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I mean, because everybody has like different PR people. There's different interpreters. There's PR from Japan. There's PR from Nintendo of America. There's PR for like the agency that they use. So yeah, there's just a lot of people in the room at any given time, and yeah, it's intense whenever they're around. But yeah, it's always a really fun time to interact with any of those absolute legends, though.
Yeah.
So Lee Cocker also tweeted, for the people that are asking, there will be no Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games for Paris 2024. the franchise finished with Mario and Sonic at the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. So that sounds pretty definitive.
Yeah. That's, I mean, hopefully, knock on wood, there's always a chance, but yeah, there has to be some sort of official word on that.
Yeah, it just feels odd not having any kind of console game for the Olympics. Like, even dating back to like Dreamcast, I remember wasting my money on one of the god awful Olympic games on the Dreamcast and being like, this was like, I think that was one of the first times that I was like, I bought a game that is bad. And like, I feel bad about it because I spent like the money that I saved up with my allowance and like cutting neighbors' grass and being like, oh man, this
Yep.
did not pan out.
Man, I don't know if kids have that anymore because I definitely would walk into a store and just be like, I guess this sounds good. I'll check it out. And it was just horrific, you know? But like nowadays, I mean, you don't really walk into stores anymore. You don't really, you have such a breadth of information. You can Google, is this good? Do people like this?
And I
Like,
specifically remember reading a glowing review for
oh
the
no.
Olympic game on Dreamcast and being like, "Oh, this must be I forget what it was a magazine for sure."
Hmm.
And I just like I can't remember what publication it was, but then I got it and I was like, "Really? This was like the 9 out of 10 that you guys gave?" So, I don't know. But like there's plenty of other like ways you can find out. But did you ever spend any kind of significant time with the Mario and Sonic games?
Um, no, I think they were always just sort of fun, casual times for me.
Mhm. Yeah, same for me. I've heard they're very good, especially Tokyo 2020.
Hmm.
I played a little bit of that at E3 2019, and I I've heard that it's very good multiplayer. And I've just never played it multiplayer aside from my time at E3,
Yeah,
which is like a 10-minute demo. So it wasn't even like I had like any like significant time with the multiplayer, but I did play a little bit of the single player once I was able to, have a full copy at my house.
maybe if you had gone up the rock wall, you would have been able to play more.
Distinct possibility that they would have let me back on the sticks.
Yeah.
Before we continue, I just want to remind everybody that the best way to interact with the All Things Nintendo podcast is through the free Patreon page. It's the easiest way to submit feedback, listener questions, and get clued into the latest news before anyone else. And as I've hinted, we will be introducing paid tiers in the somewhat near future. It's also a great group of folks over there, so be sure to head on over to Patreon and join the completely free All Things Nintendo page. And if you prefer video versions, you can follow me on YouTube now, where I'm pushing to hit 500 subscribers on my new channel, publishing clips as well as full video versions of this very podcast over there. So go on over to YouTube and join the cause there too. And finally, there is the All Things Nintendo merchandise store. You may have heard that I can no longer sell the full logo of this podcast due to the presence of a certain word in the name of the show. So I've thrown the official All Things Redacted design up on the shop, as well as a new controller outline design. You can get those designs on t-shirts, hoodies, tote bags, coffee mugs, and more. Just head to tpublic.com and search All Things Nintendo, or click the link in the description of this show. Also, a reminder that there are timestamps in the show if you want to skip around to anything in particular. Jill, we've got some Lego news. Are you, I forget, are you a Lego fan at all?
My spouse is. So I would like to know this in case it becomes necessary for me to buy something.
All right. Well, I think one of them is very good, and the other one is not maybe very
Okay.
good. So first up, we'll start with the one that I think is very good. They have released several Super Mario Brothers Lego sets already, and then a few other Nintendo ones. Like you've seen the NES one, I'm sure,
Hmm.
where it actually has Mario up on the
Mario in it.
TV screen, which is incredible. And then
Yeah.
they recently announced the Zelda Deku Tree set.
Yes.
That looks
Tell me that one's
awesome.
good. Thank you.
I mean, it
That's all
looks
I needed to
awesome.
know.
I haven't touched it yet, but it looks cool.
Okay. Okay.
Last week, I don't know if you saw this, but Nintendo announced a Super Mario World premium set,
I did
which
not
lets
see
you
this.
build a giant pixel art image of Mario wearing a cape riding Yoshi. And there's even a crank on the side that you can turn to make it look like Yoshi is running. and then you can also make his mouth open up and his tongue shoot out a little bit.
That's amazing. And I'm a terrible person because the first thing I thought you were going to say is like, so that you can dump him into
A lava pit or
a
something.
crevice. And
It looks fantastic. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, this looks like the type of Lego I would buy.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know. Like, the minifigs just don't do much for me. And it just, I love like the recreations. Like, if I had infinite space, I would absolutely, and also infinite money because they're very pricey these days.
Yeah.
I would absolutely buy all kinds of like gaming related Lego sets. Like, I would have like all the Sonic ones, all the Mario ones, probably a bunch of the Marvel ones as well. I just don't have the space for like another thing to like start up collecting.
Yeah.
um
That's the real problem.
but this is cool. Like, this reminds me of like the giant Bowser one that I loved from before, where it was like
Mhm.
it's just a Lego recreation of like a full character. And I've talked so much about my love of Super Mario World on this show, so like having one of my favorite character sprites ever in like full recreated Lego form is amazing.
I was going to ask if you had to pick between this one and the Deku Tree, but
This
it
one,
seems like
Mario
you would
World,
pick this one. Yeah.
easily. Yeah, and it's 1,215 pieces, so it's not an insignificant set, but it's not like the biggest set they've ever released. And it comes out on October 1st. Pre-orders are available now, but it will cost you $130. Speaking of
Okay.
being kind of expensive for something that's, I feel like they wanted to charge that much, and they're like, well, we can't just charge it for this very rudimentary build. We've got to make it so it moves as well.
Mhm. Got to get some of
uh,
that Yoshi tongue action out there.
Got to get that Yoshi tongue action. Uh, so continuing on, speaking of tongue action, I don't know
Oh,
how that
good. I
really.
love this segue.
The Sonic brand keeps
Okay.
telling us it's the year of Shadow,
Interesting.
and that is where we're going next with this Lego news. It has nothing to do with tongue action. I just thought that would be a funny transition.
I'm imagining all the ways that we could have gone, but okay,
So
go ahead.
Lego has announced another set that is coming out on October 1st, and that is the Shadow the Hedgehog bust set. And I gotta say, not the best representation of our boy Shadow. It just kind of looks awkward. Like, I don't
Paint
know.
me the word picture, Shay.
His head looks misshapen,
Oh.
and it doesn't look as accurate as like maybe the Bowser one did.
Mhm.
I don't know. Like, maybe I'm just like looking at it. It just, he looks smushed in some way.
Okay.
And if
Okay.
you're watching the video version, I'm throwing the actual picture of the set up right now. But I don't know. Something just looks off about poor Shadow. Maybe his quills aren't as fluffy as they should be. But yeah, I don't know. This one doesn't really do it for me. I hope that maybe they'll adjust it, make the quills look a little bit better. But for now, I don't know if you're bringing up the picture, Jill. But I need to know what you think.
Okay. I don't have the picture. Where would I find it?
I would just search Shadow the Hedgehog
Shadow
Lego.
Hedgehog. Okay, everyone be cool. We're gonna look this up. I
We'll do it
actually
live.
I have a friend who's with me on the Indie Council who wants to know this. So I have to know. Shadow Hedgehog
Okay, so it's Shadow the Hedgehog bust Lego.
bust. Lego. Oh, look at that. It auto populates. That's how important it. Oh, ew.
I mean, I guess it's fine. Like, I'm looking at it, it's better than I remember it, but like, I
No,
don't
it's
know.
not, Shay. No,
It
it's
looks like a
not.
shadow space station is what it looks like.
Ugh. Why have you made me look at this abomination? I feel like you might be getting a little bit like used to it. You're just acclimated.
Yeah, it's like when like something feels very weird, like the first time you do it or say it, and then like you say it or do it so much, it just becomes like second nature. Like, if you fold your hands in a different way, it feels weird at first, and then you just hold it for like 5 minutes. You're like, oh, this is how it normally feels to fold your hands.
There's a 7-second video, and I'm about to watch it, and everyone's gonna have my reaction right here, right now.
I didn't even know
To
there was a
it.
video.
Oh, it looks gross all the way around, Shay. But the little rings are cute down at the bottom, so we'll give it that.
Okay. Well, if you feel like spending your precious time and money on this somewhat awkward looking Shadow the Hedgehog bust, it is 720 pieces, so less involved than the Mario and Yoshi one, and it's $70. So It's less expensive and also less of a time commitment, so give and take.
Commit to the bit. Buy
I probably will not be buying it. If
it.
I'm not buying the Super Mario World one, I'm not going to be buying the Shadow the Hedgehog one.
You just have to buy all of them then.
Uh, that's right. That's how that works.
This is the time, this is where we start to get you like, okay, so you can't buy this, but look at all these indie games you could be buying for that same price.
You know, this almost sounds like how I got started with my amiibo obsession for like 3 years.
Mhm.
Because like I was like, I'm not going to buy any amiibos. This is dumb. Why would I ever do this? And then when I got a review copy of Super Smash Brothers for Wii U, Nintendo sent me the Mario
Uh-huh.
amiibo just to be
It's
like,
a
hey,
free
you can check it
sample.
out how it works. And like they say, the first taste is free. And then I was like, you know what? I want to get the Link one too because I really like Legend of Zelda. And
Yeah.
then I was like, oh, I'm going to get the other ones as well because, like, you know, I like these characters. And then, like, it slowly kept snowballing like that. And then I was like, oh, yeah,
And
this
then people learn that you like it, so they start getting it for you as like gifts and stuff, and it
that
just
has
keeps going
happened.
from there.
That
Mhm.
has happened. I've
I think
gotten
the only one
amiibos
I
for
have,
Christmas and birthday.
yeah, I have Link's Awakening, and that's it.
It's a very cute one. I have all the
Super
Zelda ones, which
adorable.
I do. I don't regret that at all. I have a lot of the Mario ones, all the Zelda ones, and then like a few of the other characters that I really like. Like, you know, I have Cloud and Sephiroth and Ryu. So it's cool to have that. And then like random Animal Crossing characters
Yeah,
because why
of
not?
course.
So Jill, during June's Nintendo Direct, we learned about Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics.
Yes, we did.
Not a mouthful at all. For some reason, it still
Rolls off
doesn't have
the
a
tongue.
release date, but during Evo, in an interview with Dextero, the collection's producer, Shuei Matsumoto, who I've actually interviewed several times for his work as the producer of Street Fighter VI, he gave us some hope for the future of the Marvel vs. Capcom franchise. So he said, quote, the development team at Capcom has big dreams. If that were to happen, that would take some time and effort in order to create and release those kinds of games. But the short term with what we can do now is at least reintroduce these past legacy games to a new audience, to people who may not have had the opportunity to play it because it might not be out on modern or current platforms. And then he continues, what we can at least do now is show that, hey, these series exist. We love these games. We hope that you do too. And maybe in the future, if people get to familiarize themselves with these series, then there may be bigger opportunities to make bigger games. So I guess my question here, Jill, is would the announcement of a new Marvel vs. Capcom game do anything for you? Are you into these? Like, did you play these games in arcades? Do you
No.
follow like any of this community whatsoever? Nothing?
I I'm I like following the people who it means a lot to. And that's true for basically any community,
Mm-hmm.
but like there's a certain energy that goes for Marvel vs. Capcom fans that is really fun to watch. So yeah, I was thinking about that and I was like, how tough is it for things that we remember as part of our like formative gaming years, that there are audiences now and platforms now that have never seen the likes of them. Like that's how kind of old we are right now.
Well, it's funny because we had a gaming night the other night for some of the games industry folks here in Minnesota. Over,
Mhm.
we all congregated at Dan Reichert's house, and he wasn't there. We were crashing his house.
We
No,
just all showed up.
he was a very gracious host. He had all of his retro consoles hooked up,
Mhm.
and the one that got the most play was the Dreamcast. And we fired up a game called Power Stone.
Okay.
And I remember loving that game so much. And I've actually pestered Shuei Matsumoto over at Capcom, the guy I just quoted about Marvel vs. Capcom, about getting a new Power Stone game or a Power Stone collection. And all he said is, yeah, we'd like that too. Like, okay, well, at least I've gotten like my request in. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
give us Power Stone.
It's
We
like in
played
his consciousness, he's going to be thinking about it in a meeting. It's like, wait a minute, I've heard a lot of people want this game.
we played Power Stone 2, which is the 4-player one. Power Stone 1 on Dreamcast was only 2 players. It has not aged as well as I remember it. I remember having the best time. It's still fun, don't get me wrong. It's still
Mhm.
fun in a very late 90s, early 2000s 3D fighter kind of way, like arena fighter. But boy, oh boy, are there some things where I'm like, this doesn't feel as good as I remember.
Yeah.
So like, it's one of those other types of things though, right? Because we got a re-release of the Power Stone collection on PSP, but that's the last time we've seen the light of day with Power Stone.
Yeah.
But it's just
You're making a
shocking to
good
me.
argument. Everyone needs to be paying attention right now.
Everybody needs to get Power Stone. No, I
Start
mean,
tweeting it out now.
I really would love a Power Stone collection, even on Switch. Like that would be such a good collection to put on Switch.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much fun. But yeah, I don't know. Marvel vs. Capcom. I like Marvel vs. Capcom. I have a Marvel vs. Capcom 2 arcade one-up cabinet right over there. You can kind of see like the deck of my Street Fighter 2 cabinet. Right next to that is a Mortal Kombat, and then next to that is a Marvel vs. Capcom 2 arcade one-up cabinet that has like all of the old school Marvel crossover games.
Mm-hmm.
So I obviously like these games, but I'm kind of tired of Marvel vs. Capcom as like a new game series. I like them for classic games. What I would rather have is just a Marvel fighting game. I don't care if it's Capcom making it. I don't care if it was like the rumor that was like swirling a couple years ago that NetherRealm was going to make a
Oh,
Marvel
yeah.
fighting game. But like it would be so cool to just have like a roster of like 50 Marvel characters. That's it. Like think of
Yeah.
how big Marvel has gotten over the last 2 decades.
I
And
mean,
just,
even just over the last weekend with all of
oh my
the
God, yeah.
announcements and people getting excited about what's happening, it would be an easy sell, I would think.
Like, and I like Capcom. I like a lot of like what Capcom does. But beyond Street Fighter and Mega Man, like they all feel like a lower tier of like characters that would appear in the game. Like even Monster Hunter, which you could argue is like a top tier Capcom franchise at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if you just throw like the Monster Hunter like you did in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, it just like, oh, this guy. It doesn't feel it doesn't feel like, oh wow, Ryu is fighting Iron Man, or like Mega Man is fighting Captain America. It's like, no, it's just like, oh, that generic looking hunter guy is fighting these iconic characters.
Yeah.
And so like, I don't know, I would rather just be the Marvel characters, or just go back to Marvel versus Street Fighter. That was like my favorite roster, I think, back in the day, until Marvel versus Capcom 2 came out. But I don't know. That's my response to this, is like, yes, it would be cool if we got a new MVC, but I would just rather it be like Marvel Superheroes 2 or
Okay,
Marvel
what if
Superheroes 2025 or whatever.
we got Marvel versus Mario versus Sonic at the Olympics?
Let's move on. No, honestly, I'm kind of over crossovers in fighting games. Like
And so
Mortal
you say
Kombat
that
1.
until you get a good one, and
Well,
then you'll be over the moon.
it's weird though, because like Super Smash Brothers Ultimate is incredible and I love the crossover stuff in that, but I feel like it's so good it has almost invalidated all the other crossover content. Like
Mm-hmm.
Mortal Kombat 1, I liked that game overall. The DLC, there's some cool stuff in there. Like I liked like having Homelander and Omni-Man from Invincible in there. But it's also like we could just have like really cool Mortal Kombat characters in there instead. And they just announced like the next wave of DLC, which I didn't include in the rundown here, but like
But now
let's
you're gonna.
now I'm going to. So here is the pack 2. Okay, so female Sector, which is cool. It's a Marvel or a Mortal Kombat character. Cyrax, Noob Saibot. So far, so good. That's 3 for 3 on like really awesome Mortal Kombat characters. Then we have Conan the Barbarian in the likeness of Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Interesting.
Then we have the T-1000 from
Okay.
Terminator 2. And then we have Ghostface from Scream.
Huh.
And I'm
Okay.
like, I get it, like it, but it's like it just feels like such like a random scatter shot
Mm-hmm.
of DLC characters.
Do
And
you
it's
think
like,
people are getting some inspiration from things like Fortnite, where it's just the ultimate sort of multiverse and you just throw in whatever wild things you can?
I'm sure they are, but like, every Mortal Kombat game since Mortal Kombat 9 has had crossover fighters, and it was such a cool novelty back then.
Yeah.
But now I'm just kind of like, yeah, but we could have like really cool Mortal Kombat characters in those places instead. And there's still like a lot of really great characters from that series that aren't in MK1. And it's like, man, it kind of sucks that we don't have like character X or character Y, and we're getting Scream from or Ghostface from Scream.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know. It's cool to have like one or two crossover characters, but it's just I feel like it's getting out of control, and that's almost how I feel about Marvel versus Capcom. It's like, yeah, do like a Marvel fighting game, and then maybe do like Capcom Pack or something like that as like DLC, and like give me like Ryu, Chun Li, and Mega Man in that pack or something.
Right.
I'd
Or
be happily,
clothing,
yeah, or
cosmetic or something.
yeah, and like the same thing applied for like Street Fighter 6. Like they did like a couple of like brand collaborations, but it wasn't like, oh well, the DLC is going to be this crossover character. And yes, they are putting a crossover character in the form of Terry in their next year of Street Fighter characters, but like it's the exception rather than the rule.
Mm-hmm.
But like what they did was they did like a Ninja Turtles crossover, which I was like, oh, that's going to be cool. Like, 'cause it's not like they're replacing a character with that. It is like, no, we're just giving you like a Ninja Turtles costume that you can apply to your created character. And I would have bought the crap out of that if it wasn't a $10 DLC like cosmetic. And I'm like, nope, never mind.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's ways to do it, and I think I'm just kind of over the crossover thing. If you're listening to this and you have a strong opinion on the matter, like leave a comment on the Patreon, leave a comment on the Spotify episode, leave a comment on the YouTube channel, wherever you listen to this. Like leave a comment and let me know what your thoughts are on crossover characters as playable characters in these games, like Mortal Kombat, like having half the roster devoted to Capcom instead of just a full roster of Marvel characters. Maybe I'm just a Marvel fanboy, and that's what the issue is here. But let's move on, Jill. This is a game that you brought to my attention.
Is it?
Minami Lane.
Yeah.
It is a game that hit Steam earlier this year, and now it's announced that it's coming to Switch this very month. Tell me all about this game, Jill.
So, it is a very cozy hand-drawn. It's not exactly a management sim, city builder sort of thing. The basic idea is that you are attempting to make the perfect neighborhood, very like it's Japanese coded neighborhood. It starts off with just one tiny little street, and you're trying to get some kind of goal, whether or not that is make a certain number of people happy or make a lot of money, or once you finish the challenge for the first level, you go on to the second level. It introduces new building types and new ways to do things and new types of people. So you start off with like, I don't know, 3 sections of road or something. It's very, very small, and it's only young adults that are there. So they like a certain type of ramen, and you can go in and make your ramen shop better. And you kind of have to like watch what they're saying as they walk by. And they just have little bumps on their head, like little bubbles above their head that they're kind of like thinking. And I got so irritated at them. I'm like, no, you should like my ramen. My ramen's amazing. But mostly it is just sort of a laid back, lovely experience. And it's one of those things that is a very good mixture of putting you on rails. Like you don't have a lot that you can't go wrong really, except not to make the ramen perfect, but also giving you that sense of freedom so that you don't feel caged in, but you don't feel like, I don't know what to do. There's so much. So if you're the kind of person who hears like a city builder and you're like, oh, that's always been so intimidating. The fact that like, I don't know how to connect all these buildings and make all this interconnected stuff work. This might be the game you want to check out because it is very much like you have enough money to build a flower shop, a bookstore, one building, like 1-story apartment, and that will make this certain type of person happy. And that's what you do. And then you go on to the next thing. And then they have like little challenges somewhat just randomly. And so like you can pick up trash on the street because people are just be throwing trash on my street, my
Well, that
perfect street.
I will say that's not very Japanese coded there because
Yeah.
Tokyo is the cleanest city I've ever been in my life.
It's so bizarre because, like, you have trash and you're like, there are no trash cans. I don't know what to do with this. I'm just gonna put it in my pocket and walk around with it, I guess.
Oh, the cheat code is to go into one of the convenience stores and they'll have a trash can up front.
You can build your own convenience store. Um, so it is just a really lovely. You can pick up trash. You find tankunis, the little like raccoon dogs.
Tanuki?
Tanuki. Thank you. Um,
Yes,
and
I'm looking at the Steam page right now. It's overwhelmingly positive,
yeah,
both
because
on
it is
recent reviews
overwhelmingly
and all
positive.
reviews. And the eShop page, I just looked it up. The eShop page is not listed yet, but Steam, it's only $5.
Yeah,
This is
100%.
like a future eShop gem of the week. It's like looking into your crystal ball and telling me a future eShop gem of the week right now.
And they just announced that it was coming on August 15th today. So this is fresh news. Right.
Yeah.
I like just like an hour before we went live. I'm like, Shay, look at this. This just came out.
Yeah, you're like, I want to talk about this. And I'm like, what is this? And now I'm like looking at the Steam page and I'm like, oh my God, this looks so charming.
It is.
And it looks right up my alley. It's immediately on my wish list as soon as it hits the eShop, which it has not yet because it's such a new announcement as of this recording.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for that. Like watching the trailer while you were painting it in such flowery language. I'm in. I'm in. I'm excited for this. I have a couple trips coming up, so I will be
Oh,
playing
this is
that
a
on the plane.
perfect like plane game.
No,
Yeah.
I've been so wrapped up in Balatro with
My,
recent plane trips that maybe I'm due for another one, another plane game.
yeah. Go for it.
All right, Jill. We knew we couldn't avoid this one. Some sad news to
Yeah.
wrap up the news segment.
Mm-hmm.
The entire staff of Humble Games, which is the Humble Bundle's indie publishing arm, has been laid off and the company has been shut down. You're the indie expert here. I guess what have you heard regarding this?
So the first inkling I had that this was happening, and some of this you have to understand is just so wild because it came out of nowhere,
Mm-hmm.
was on social media by people who had been let go. So we were getting bits and pieces at a time of like, you know how when a story first hits and you're like, that can't possibly be. So you're hearing things like the entire Humble Games is gone, and you're like, okay, that can't be real. And
Has to
then
be
it
an
comes out like,
exaggeration.
yeah, it's got to be an exaggeration. Humble put out a statement where they said they were just kind of restructuring and trying to downplay that a little bit, but it does turn out that everyone was let go.
Yeah. Was it
Um,
36
it
employees?
was 36 employees in total.
God.
Yeah, I mean, and
And also, I think it came out that like a lot of people investigated it, and it looked like the statement put out by Humble Games was also written by AI.
oh, that would not be a good look.
Yeah, I mean, well, it didn't get like proven, but like
Right.
a lot of people ran it through like, is this AI? Like
AI, yeah.
the checks, and it's like almost certainly this was AI.
It's also, if you go on to Twitter for the Humble Games statement, there is the little like fact checking thing down at the
Oh
bottom.
boy,
And it says, contrary to Humble Games' PR statement, the publisher's restructuring meant all of the staff had been fired. It's
just
like,
awful.
yeah, so you don't know how to think about that in the fact that this is not a space that was unsuccessful. We are talking about this to some degree because Bo, Path of the Teal Lotus, just came out. It literally came out like a week or so ago. And they are also talking about what this means because this also hit them as a surprise. So the day after this news originally hit, the team behind this game said, we don't know what this means for us. We don't understand like a lot of our support for the like the Switch build, for any of the console builds, for any of the future updates we were planning. a lot of that was supported by our publisher, and now that the publisher's not there, we don't know what that means for us,
Yeah, I
and
have
that's
their quote right here, which is
go for
really,
it.
I mean, it's part of the statement. I'm not going to read the whole statement, but they put out a statement saying, quote, "We are now in a difficult situation when it comes to updating the console ports, as both porting and QA support was tied into our deal with Humble. We are actively pursuing all available avenues to allow us to roll out updates to console versions, but we regret to say this may take some time to put in place."
Yeah.
God, that's
And
an awful place to be in. Like, just releasing your game, and like,
acclaimed.
what game comes out these days that doesn't require at least some patchwork? Like,
Right.
almost every game, and like they kind of just assume, like, okay, the first like couple of days it'll take some time to like get this patch out the door, and then we'll be in a great place. So like, regardless of how good the game is, and we're going to talk about it on the second segment here, it's just really, really frustrating that they're going to have to jump through additional hoops just to make it so that the patches that they had planned and have probably been working on for weeks now, uh, to get them certified and pushed through to get to the console versions.
Yeah. There is also a whole nother wrinkle to this as well, that for you and me in particular in this journalistic space might be of interest, because um, Humble Games was owned under the umbrella of IGN Entertainment. Um, and part of the reason that this news story has been breaking in piecemeal kind of ways has a lot to do with the fact that IGN Entertainment back in May, I want to say, picked up a ton of new journalistic outlets.
Mm-hmm.
So you have obviously IGN, but Rock Paper Shotgun would have been one of the bigger outlets that you would see this kind of news in. And a lot of people over at IGN, like, I think of Rebecca Valentine as particularly good investigative reporter who would have been perfect to handle what on earth is going on in this space right now, who are just not able to say anything because it is their company,
Mm.
and their hands are a little tied here on being able to comment on what is going on internally, because most of the time, I don't know specifically about IGN, but most of the time if you're writing for an outlet, they do say like you're not allowed to divulge information from internal what's going on. So it is also very scary to me, showing that my initial fears hearing about this IGN acquisition sort of playing out in the way I thought it might. If you have a situation where one umbrella company owns so much of the entertainment journalism, what happens when you have a story that deserves to be talked about and to be looked into and to dived into, and people deserve to have their story told, but you can't effectively as a journalist. And it's a really interesting and for me kind of startling and scary future of journalism, because I'm in that space. That means a lot to me, and I know that that has not been the main thrust of this story and has not been really looked into. Rightfully, a lot of people have lost their jobs and their livelihoods, and we should be focusing on that human aspect as well. But I think more people should be thinking about how our news is coming to us.
I mean, I think that it just in a broader picture, I think consolidation has been an awful thing for this industry. Like, look at the bulk of the layoffs in this year alone. It's been Xbox laying off so many of their employees after acquiring Activision Blizzard for just an absurd amount of money. And it's like, oh no, we're not, we're about, welcoming them to the family. And then, like, immediately cutting out thousands of members of their family.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's
we have
so much
PlayStation and Bungie
consolidation.
going on right
Yeah,
now.
it's just been such a heartbreaking. I didn't bring up Bungie just because, like, they don't make any Nintendo games, but pretty massive layoffs this week as well. And it just feels like, every single time things start slowing down on that front, we get hit with a week like this one.
Yeah. And in a time period where Humble Games should be doing its victory lap, it is putting out amazing games right now. Bo is one of the greatest games that came out this month. Like,
Hmm.
It's wild. It's
And
wild.
like I've made the point a few times that like AAA development has shown how unsustainable it is over the past couple of years. But like that kind of makes it hurt that much more when we're seeing like more of these indies affected, like whether it's indie developers or indie publishers. Like, what is the obvious, like, is there any obvious way forward in this industry where people can feel secure in their jobs? Because like originally I was like, oh well, like, try to work for companies that aren't as like bloated or like just no beholden to shareholders, but it's like that doesn't even seem to
Yeah.
matter anymore.
And because this was an indie publisher, um, it also worsens the underlying problem that indies are having right now of getting funding at all. So if you are one of these people who are being laid off from bigger companies and you think, I'll just go off and start my own studio and we'll make our own thing and we won't be beholden to anyone. And it's like, well, you still need to find the money for that somehow. And having a major publisher like Humble Games just literally wake up and is gone is only making that problem so much worse and making it very clear that when these bigger umbrella companies run into some sort of we need to cut costs for whatever reason, uh, it's never the heads of the companies are taking pay cuts or whatever. It's going to be,
Mm-mm.
oh, let's let go of the indie people. Let's let go of all the small projects.
No, I mean,
But
what are they supposed to do? Not buy that extra Porsche?
yeah.
No.
And it's like we were talking about earlier in when we were talking about good news for Nintendo hiring. It is a little bit of shooting yourself in the foot because you are losing so much of this internal knowledge. You're losing so much of these people who knew this industry and knew had their finger on the pulse of what was going to be good and exciting and capture people's attention. And
I mean, it goes back to this. This was before your time at Game Informer, Jill. But like back in 2019, when we got hit with the huge layoffs that we had, where
mhm,
we lost 40% of our staff, I think I ran the numbers, and like in that one layoff event alone, I think we lost like 125 years of just Game Informer experience, not even like industry experience,
yeah,
Game Informer experience, just because we lost like so many editors with like that were so long tenured. And it's like I don't care like what we do from there, there is no replacing that. And the same could be said about all these studios that are laying off all these like incredibly experienced people with so much know-how. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like it's just the games industry either. Like we just saw like the news a few months ago that like Pixar was laying off all kinds of people, and like one of them
yo,
was the guy that saved Toy Story 2, aka saved Pixar
I
when
don't know
like
if
their
you heard
computers
the
crashed.
Intel news.
No.
Uh, you want to hear a number that's wild?
No, but yes.
15,000.
Jesus.
Yeah. That's the rumor. That's what I've heard. I haven't looked, I haven't read the full article, but I remember that number because, wow, that's a ton of people to be laying off.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, this has gone
so
down a fun path.
think about Minami Lane, everybody. It's
Uh,
lovely.
we were going to wrap up with that, but you know what? We're not going to end with that because we have some breaking news. Pokemon Save Us! We have a new addition to the Nintendo Switch Online. It just came in while we were recording this segment that Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team is coming to the Game Boy Advance
It's
Nintendo
coming to
Switch Online catalog.
our rescue.
Yes, it is coming to our rescue from this very sad end to the news segment. So yeah, that came out on Game Boy Advance. It's arriving on Nintendo Switch Online August 9th. I've actually never played the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games. I know it has a lot of fans. So yeah, so I'm reading here. It says, as the hero of this journey, you'll begin the game by taking a personality quiz with the results determining which Pokemon you will become out of several options, including Pikachu, Eevee, Charmander, Totodile, and Chikorita, just to name a few. From there, you'll select your partner Pokemon before being whisked to a world full of Pokemon to befriend and dungeons to explore. Form your rescue team and take on mysterious changing dungeons and engage in strategic turn-based battles in this game originally released on the Game Boy Advance system. I might check that out. Didn't they do like a remake of it at some
Yeah,
point?
something recently.
Was that on Switch or was that on 3DS? It's
I
all
want to say
blending together.
Switch.
Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX. Let's see. It is on Nintendo Switch.
Haha.
Interesting that they would put that out then. You would think they'd be like, no, buy the remake.
Right.
But still, no mainline Pokemon games on Switch, on Nintendo Switch Online, that is. I mean, obviously there's Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet, but like, give us Pokemon Red,
Anything.
Blue, Silver, Gold, Heart Gold,
Yeah.
Soul Silver, Fire Red, Leaf Green, all those. You could go all the way up to Black and White. Like, that would be amazing. But
Yeah. I
yeah.
tried to jump into Let's Go Pikachu for that, but it's so updated that it just didn't have that same old school Pokemon feel.
Yeah, I mean, I like that it's the story, but like, yeah, you're right. They learned all the wrong lessons from Pokemon Go with
Yeah.
that one. But yeah, that's a good way to dig us out of that depressing hole of talking about the state of the industry.
We apologize.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll be chatting about our experiences with several new indie releases, including SteamWorld Heist 2. We will be right back. We are back, and you know that when I have Jill on All Things Nintendo, we always have to get caught up on the latest indies to come to the Switch. And originally, like I mentioned at the top of the show, I only had a few, but then I opened Twitter to find a DM from Jill with a list of games she wanted to talk about. So who am I to say no to my own personal indie tour guide? So Jill, I think we should start off with what I consider to maybe be the headliner here, and that is SteamWorld Heist 2. I think that's probably the biggest name on this list just because it's part of such an established franchise.
Yeah.
You've been playing a little bit of it. I've been playing a decent amount of it. I probably have about 5 hours at this point. SteamWorld Heist 2, follow up to the game that came out on pretty much every platform, about 8 years ago, 9 years ago?
It's been a long time,
It's
yeah.
been a while. It's been several SteamWorld games. SteamWorld Build was last year, if I'm not mistaken.
I want to say 2 years ago now.
No way.
Time has no meaning, Shea. I don't think it was this year.
I'm doing a record amount of Googling on this episode. December 2023. So you are wrong.
Oh, I was so close to being right, Shea.
You were almost a year away from being right. You said 2 years ago. It was December 2023.
Oh, okay, never mind.
It was less than a year ago.
Okay, it feels like it's been 2 years.
SteamWorld Heist was a really fun game. I didn't play a ton of the original one, but basically the way to describe it is it's like a turn-based tactics game, but it's a 2D title. It's not like isometric. It's not top-down. It is like you're exploring a 2D environment, and it's just turn-based tactics. Like you position your characters. It's like XCOM if it was just like a 2D game.
Yeah.
And I love that. And like, there's like environmental hazards. Like you can shoot like explosive barrels to knock out enemies. You can bounce shots off walls, which is cool. And some of the characters have like longer sight lines. So like if you have a sniper, they can like have like a line almost like in Puzzle Bobble, where it's like you have the line that shows you how the bullet's gonna ricochet.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, like, if you have a shotgun or like a machine gun, you can just like aim and fire, and like sometimes you'll get lucky and it'll bounce off and I'll be like, oh, I totally meant to do that.
100%.
But it's so satisfying when you get that. But like this game adds so much to like layer on the depth. Like each character has like a unique progression. Each class has unique progression. You can buy different weapons for different characters. So like I had my sniper and she had like a, just kind of a standard sniper rifle. And I found a like almost like a shock grenade launcher. And I gave that to her. So she still has like the long sight line, but now she's shooting shock grenades. So like it hits them and it hits like almost like a little bit of an AoE effect where it like, and it's really damaging too. At first I was like resistant. It kept saying like, hey, you have a better weapon you could equip. And I'm like, no, I just want to stick with like the traditional sniper rifle for this character. And then I tried that on one mission. I'm like, oh, I'm never going back.
Yeah.
Until, I get a better one. But I'm having a good time with this one. There's also like overworld ship battles. Like you when you're going between levels, like you are like piloting a submarine or captaining a submarine, and like other ships will come at you, and like you have to equip guns on your submarine, which you can buy with your money that you get from your heists. and then like you have to line up the shot just right. Like you can get guns that are on the front and on the top and then like on the sides. At the early part of the game, you only have them on the sides, so you have to like position your guns, and like
Yeah.
if one side machine gun runs out of bullets, you have to quickly switch so your other side is facing them. And there's not much strategy to it, but it is fun. Like,
Yeah. My
I,
my Tokyo Drift game is fantastic on this because I always come in, I get them from the back, I start off with my left-hand side, and I just whip around really quick to get my other side so that I've got like 10 bullets shooting all at once. It's perfect. I've got that strategy down. And this is something new. This is not something that they had in their first SteamWorld Heist, the kind of overworld boat situation. Um, I, I think you said it pretty well. I think this game is enjoyable. This is an enjoyable game to pick up and play. Um, there's not a lot of deepness to the overworld. It is just there for kind of exploring. You've got very basic fog of war situation. So you get close to it and you reveal the map a little bit. And then sometimes there will be tiny little coves or something you can slip into and you're like, ooh, I'm exploring. Um, I found like a pirate hideout at one
yeah.
point where it was just like the bad guy and me just kind of looked at each other and we're like, so everything's cool, right? Yeah. And went down and picked up treasure. The other thing about this, like any SteamWorld game, all of the SteamWorld games kind of exist in the same universe.
Hmm.
So the basic idea is that these are robots that exist on Steam, and the money, quote unquote, that you get in different adventures that you go on is water because they
Hmm.
are running out of water, and you need water if you are a Steam-based uh, creature. So that is, I think, one of the funniest things is that we're on the ocean. That I I don't know exactly what's happening. Like the water is turning toxic, but in my head canon, the water is becoming seawater because it's like corroding them in their metals. So of course the
Okay.
seawater is starting to like corrode them. Um, again, the dialogue is fun. The
It's a little bit too much of it, I think.
Yeah, there's a little bit, and there's a lot of like for some reason, I'm not loving the vibes when you go into a bar. I don't know what it is. There's something about I want the straight up piratey like sound and feel, but they're going with a kind of like alt folk sound here.
Yeah, I could see that.
I'm not a huge fan of. But besides that, everything is really solid. I really do like all of the mechanics of going around. And even when you're in an empty room, if you're on a mission, you have to like click to get your character to go in a place. I love the creativity of all the different missions. Not It's never
Mm.
the same mission twice. And I think it's only one time where the mission is kill people. Like,
Yeah, it's usually go in and get your loot and then
yeah,
get out.
get the loot, get this particular type of loot, get this loot before it expires, save this person. Like, it's a lot of different. And then, of course, there are different levels. So it's not just go in one floor, there are always different floors. And you have to think
Mm.
about whether or not, if I open this hatch that goes up, it could be a big treasure chest, or it could be like 20 more guys who are going to come
Hmm.
and destroy me. It is also very user friendly in the way that it explains how everything works, so it's not overwhelming in the way that maybe an XCOM is to people. Um, but it's also really deep and intricate if you want to get really deep and intricate with it. I picked up, like, this is what's going to be the conversation with a lot of people is like, you found this? Where'd you find that? I found this. I found a sidearm which works like a consumable item,
Oh.
but it was a sniper sidearm.
Oh, I got
So
one of those just recently.
isn't
Yeah.
that it's really cool. So you can give it to anyone. You don't have to give it to your sniper. And then they get line of sight in order to know where they're shooting. So if you give it to someone who doesn't have that normally, you can do line of sight with this. It takes up an action but doesn't stop your turn.
Mm.
And then you can use your action like turn with your actual gun with no line of sight, but just point in the same direction and you already know where your bullet's going to ricochet. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'm down for this.
Yeah, I'm having a really good time with it. Um, I like that there's also like the character recruitment aspect to it, where it's like, oh, I can recruit these new characters, and then like the more you play with the characters, the more they level up and unlock new skills, and you can change their classes and everything. So like, yeah, I mean, I'll have a full review on GameInformer.com at some point in the near future.
Hmm.
But yeah, overall positive on my thoughts with SteamWorld Heist 2. It sounds like you are also overall positive, even though you have some
Yeah, I
reservations.
have some reservations, but overall, this is um, an enjoyable game to play if you're interested in this kind of game. Like, I wouldn't go into it thinking it's going to be the next big thing, but if this is your kind of game, then go for it. If you've always wanted to try this kind of game and it always seemed a little bit scary, also try this because this is a good game for that.
Yeah, it's a good entry point for the turn-based strategy genre.
100%.
All right, Jill, let's run down your list here. We have
Yeah.
first up the star named Eos.
I think it's EOS.
EOS.
I
Okay,
know. I
excuse
don't
me.
know why, and I don't know what that title actually means. Having played and finished and rolled credits on this game, um, this is a sort of puzzle, photography, mystery, narrative driven game. It's a lot of different genres, which is a hallmark of a game that I enjoy, and also very beautifully hand drawn. Um, you begin as a character having a dream. And I think it's very important to start out this way because a lot of what is happening in the game is a perception based, non reality, dealing with reality situation. And you don't really get into what all of that means until much later in the game. But
Okay,
there's
so
a,
no spoilers then.
yeah, there is a huge mystery in this game. And what wouldn't be a spoiler to say is your character originally knows that they are following in the footsteps of their mother, whom does not show up in the beginning of the game. You don't really know what's happened to this person. You don't know why you're following their footsteps. Um, it begins in a beautiful sunny room that's your bedroom, and you're going around and you're picking up like, oh, this is my old puzzle box, and you have to like find a way to rearrange like these stones that look like stars so that they all line up, and it's all just these little tiny beautifully crafted puzzle games which lead one into the other. It's like, okay, I've opened that box, which allows me to put the little figurine on the box that opens this box, which has a stripe of paper, which was pulled out of the storybook from my childhood, which actually gives me a clue as to how to open this particular box. And it is just really like there is no fat on these puzzles. It is one to the other to the next, but they are simultaneously, they make you feel very smart for having figured them out, but
Hmm.
also are not so puzzling that you're going to sit there and try to beat your head against a wall figuring out what the solution is.
Oh, and this is the studio from behind the frame.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at the Steam trailer right now because, like I said, I didn't say this already, but like, it's for some reason not. It's listed on the eShop, but not available to purchase right now, even though it came
Interesting.
out July 24th, I believe.
Yeah, it's come out very recently.
It like I don't know. Maybe go to your eShop, see if you can find star named EOS,
I've got a
and
direct download option.
oh,
So,
well,
uh
I did not. At least right before this show started.
maybe they know that I'm a true believer.
Clearly, star. Oh, geez, star named EOS. Okay, now it says direct
There we
download. It
go.
did not as of like an hour and a half ago when I was adding this information to the rundown here.
Technology is against you.
But either way, it has been a technology day, folks. I'm looking at the trailer. It's very pretty art style.
Yes. Very, very beautiful. Very much like Behind the Frame in that sense.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm going to warn you right now, when you get about halfway through the game, gets dark. I was not expecting the turn that happened. And
Oh
I was like,
no.
oh, okay, that's happening. Um,
I,
I think the
I,
second half of the game gets a little weaker because it turns away from a lot of these intricate, deeply woven puzzles to a much more on rails narrative situation. But
mhm.
just the first couple of puzzles alone is worth checking this game out.
Awesome. Well, that sounds like one that again, going on the wish list.
I'm
So thank you for your service. Um,
always here.
that is available now on Switch if it sounds up your alley as it does mine. I wanted to bring up this one because it caught my eye at Summer Game Fest or not this year, last year.
Hmm.
Summer Game Fest caught my eye. Shim,
Yeah,
Schim. I don't know how to pronounce it. That's what we're going with, is Shim
we'll go for it.
or Scheme, maybe
Shim, Shim,
Shim.
Shim.
Uh, and yeah, basically like you're a little like shadow creature,
Little shadow
and
frog.
you have to traverse these areas, and you can only travel where there is shadow.
Hmm.
So you start like, there's a car driving by and you can swim along the sidewalk as long as the car's shadow is cast onto the sidewalk, and you can follow along with the car. Or like, oh, there's like a telephone pole that is like casting a shadow. You can jump in that pole and swim along that line that is there, and then you have to jump in like a person's walking by, and you can jump into where that person's walking and then follow it, and you just have to like get over to like the destination. And it's a fun way of like making it so you have to kind of think of like, okay, how do I utilize the shadows to get from point A to point B?
Yeah.
And like I said, like sometimes it's a person walking by and you just have to like be patient and wait for a person to like walk by where you're trying to go. And other times it's like, oh, well, maybe if I like fling myself using this object, I can get like I can jump from this shadow to the next one. What have your initial thoughts been of Sheem?
Um, I actually didn't expect there to be such a narrative focus.
Mm,
Because I started out and you get a really sort of thoughtful narrative of this growing boy who, like, obviously they're teaching the tutorial at the same time, and I love when they kind of integrate the story introduction with the tutorial, of just growing up and going to school and finding love and losing love, uh, getting your first job, losing your first job, and just kind of like you're feeling the heartbreak of a lot of this. And without dialogue, it's all kind of showing. And your shadow is with you through all of this, and you're trying to like be there for your person. And when you are kind of at the height of needing to be there, the person loses hope. You kind of see the light dim from them essentially, and like you break your connection with your person breaks, and the whole game is about finding them again to reconnect. And it's like
mm.
that's a really cool background to have while you're doing these fun, like essentially it's like when you were a kid and you would play like The Ground is Lava. It is a
Yeah.
it is a video game version of that, and if you find that fun, there's just a lot of silly little like, oh, how cute! Like it's a goose. I'm getting into the shadow of a goose, um, and enjoying the atmosphere and the landscapes they have. All of them are very. It is a very beautiful game to look at. Sort of monochronistic levels, and then you have this kind of heartfelt story going on in the background.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like you've played a little bit more than I have, but it's one of those games, like I said, it caught my eye at Summer Game Fest back in 2023, and I'm glad that it's finally out, and like I've had a chance to play a bit more of it, and it hasn't really let me down. So that is available now on Switch. And Jill, we've mentioned this game already
Yeah.
in the news segment. Bo Path of the Teal Lotus.
Yes.
What is this game all about? Because I've heard this game come up so many times over the past few months, and I've not had a chance to play it yet.
It is so unfair how beautiful this game is, Shay. It is so unfair. It is like an ink drawing has come to life. Um, and the gameplay, like, I don't know. I know that Marcus did play and review Nine Souls. Um, and there's a lot of comparison to make between these two games, but a lot of contrast to make between them. And it's kind of where I like to start. It is a Metroidvania type, fast action type game, but it is a much more accessible version of that if people find these games to be too challenging or they don't want to go through all the hassle of these deeply horrendous, like, Nine Souls is like dramatic and bloody in a way that Bo is not. Bo is essentially a pleasant, lovely experience. You
Hmm.
play as a kami, like a fox spirit, and oh man, the intro. If you have not seen the intro video, even if you're not going to pick this game up, go watch the intro video because it is so gorgeous. Um, and you come to life, and you come to life in this moment where you're kind of traversing a 2D area. And in the background is like this beautiful golden temple and shimmering in its beauty. And all of a sudden, like a really scary, dark skeleton creature just envelops it. And I'm like, okay, I hope that's not a problem. And then I keep walking and I
Sounds
go,
like a problem.
yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a problem, but like my character doesn't really know anything about it. It's just kind of happening in the background. So I'm like, I hope that doesn't come to bite me. Um, it's like you stop, your bonfires are kind of like little shrines where you drink tea and just sit down
Oh.
and take a second to like enjoy yourself. A lot of this game is about verticality. So one of the early things that you learn is by hitting enemies or lanterns that are placed around with your staff, you can just stay in the air like indefinitely.
Mm.
So it is a lot of verticality. It is a lot of um, platforming skill set. And then eventually you have little enemies, but not a ton going through level to level. And then you do run into set kind of boss fights where you typically are using the ability that you have gotten recently as the way to defeat them. So it's not huge into like combat is not really necessarily the biggest thing. It is a lot of figure out the gimmick and figure out how your ability works into this in order to beat the game. I
Mm.
have not actually beat the game, so I'm just going to throw that out there. But it is just it's really very delightful. And what I think might become I don't know if I can say this because there are so many beautiful games, but it might be the most beautiful game of this year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Trying to think
so
of what else
unfair.
could be in there.
A Ranger we're going to be talking
We're
about.
talking about that very soon.
Um, Dungeons of Hinterberg is definitely going to be up on that
It's a
list.
pretty game.
Uh, we just talked about Star Named EOS, which is also very,
Yeah.
very beautiful. So, I mean, there are a lot.
I'm looking up my list of like my favorite games of this year. Let me see which ones I think are like worthy of being in this conversation. Mini Shoot Adventures is a very charming art
Yes.
style. I mean, if you want to just talk pure like technical proficiency, like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth are both very good looking games, but not in the same way.
Right. Oh, Botany
Um,
Manor is going to be in that list somewhere. Nine
yeah.
Souls itself is going to be in there because it's absolutely gorgeous as well.
Please Fix the Road, which I know is an older game, but it's new to Switch.
Yeah. Um,
Uh,
I don't know if you want to throw like Animal Well in there because it is such an odd.
it is
Uh,
very distinct, though.
yes, but there are a lot of really beautiful games that have come out recently.
Yeah. Well, Bowpath the Teal Lotus looks very cool. I'll have to check it out at some point. one that I'm probably not going to check out that you gave me, Darkest Dungeon 2.
Dum dum.
So why did you feel so drawn to this? I know it's been out on PC for a while now, but it's what, July 15th is when it came to consoles?
Yes. Darkest Dungeon 2 actually came out when Dan and I were both still a Game Informer. And I remember very distinctly because we got to nerd out with each other because we're the big Darkest Dungeon people on the staff at
Mm.
that time. Um, I I've always loved Darkest Dungeon. I am a big fan of Red Hook, developer. Um, there is something so fantastic about looking into how mentally broken people would be if you were in this situation. If you were really the hero of these stories and you're seeing these things up close and you're really dealing with eldritch horrors and just murdering people, like something would happen to you psychologically. And I really enjoy that this is a part of what they're looking at here. And of course, there is Darkest Dungeon 2 is a follow-up to number 1, and the world is absolutely destroyed. So there's a really cool continuation of what it means to be living in this world and to be a hero in a world that is essentially doomed, and that you might have doomed yourself. There is
Way
also,
to
of
go,
course,
Jill.
I'm sorry, I can't help it. Um, there is also the element of intense difficulty, which I know is not for everybody, but when you get through one of these, you are pumping your fist in the air. You are so excited for yourself. You know that you accomplished something tremendous. Um, and when you lose a person, you feel for that person because in this particular game, unlike the first game, you have the same people sort of going through run after run, and they start to pick up personalities and traits as they go that will stay with them as long as they don't die, through their different runs. So it's like, oh yeah, I remember when we picked that particular like disease up or perk up.
I remember fondly when I picked up this disease.
I mean, sometimes it's weirdly helpful to have a disease because it means like, okay, my person's already poisoned. I don't need to worry about poison. And this one also has a really cool interplay of relationships, uh,
Okay.
which I also really enjoy when two of my characters who I'm like, yeah, my front of the line person is having a great time and backing up the person right behind him, and they're becoming best buds and they're sharing memories together. And so you get that sort of sense of like, this is really an adventuring party. And
And then one dies and it's
and then everything
heartbreaking.
falls apart. You're like, but you can get out of a run, which is cool.
Hmm.
So when you get to like a stopping point, which would be an inn, you can say like, okay, we're gonna step away. I'm gonna take away whatever I've won.
Okay. Well, I mean, you've almost convinced me to try this, Jill.
Haha.
Almost. And we should mention it's like a turn-based RPG in terms of like the combat, right?
Yeah, and it's
Okay.
very very important where you put everybody in terms of how their skills work
So a
together.
strategic turn-based RPG.
Yeah. And you can go check out, I think Dan and I played it on content for Game Informer, so go check that out.
Hey, I just saw Dan not too long ago.
I know, he was lovely. It's
Yeah.
always great to see him in his velvet jackets.
He always has the best blazers on.
Mm-hmm.
Best blazers in the game. All right, so here's one that I actually picked up for Xbox, and I have not played it yet, but it looks really cool. It's Exophobia.
Yes. This is not my kind of game, but I love it so much that I sort of just want to shout it out to people. Exophobia is a 2D, vibrantly hand drawn art style, which simulates this sort of old school first person shooter. And it takes place in outer space, and you're just going room to room and trying to like want to actually read this. It says, "You find yourself alone in a human spaceship taken over by hostile alien soldiers. Explore and fight your way to find the last human survivors while you uncover piece by piece the backstory of the spaceship crew, leading to the high stakes moment at the Red Planet." It's like, come on, it's just old school. Like, that is not a story you hear too often, and I want more people who are interested in this kind of game to hear about this game.
Yeah, and like it's such an interesting like first person shooter. I don't even know how to describe the art style.
Yeah.
It's very like cyberpunk neon tinged, but also it looks like a DOS game from like 1993.
Yeah.
Like it looks like you're playing like a cyberpunk version of like Duke Nukem 3D, which there's worse comparisons to make there. The art style, even though it's um, a different perspective altogether, it reminds me almost of Cobalt Core. Did you play
Okay.
that?
Yeah. Yeah. A little bit.
I had a good time with that game. Um, but yeah, so Exophobia, it's available now on Switch and pretty much everything, if I'm not mistaken. Like I think it's
I
on
think
all
so. It's
platforms. So yeah, I'm watching this. I'm watching a guy stream it on Steam right now, and it looks like a lot of fun. He just put on some glasses to save, like some VR glasses, and yeah, oh yep, Switch, PlayStation, Xbox, and Steam. All right,
but we only care about the Switch here.
that's all we care about. Yes. So here's one that I've been hearing a lot about,
Okay.
Jill.
I'm ready.
A Ranger.
Yes.
This is maybe one of the most talked about indies of July.
It's very possible. Um, a Ranger, a role puzzling adventure, is a really good way. It's not only the title, but it's a really good way to explain what this game is, because it is a strange combination of things. It is, I think, first and foremost, a story driven adventure game. But in order to do anything in this world, you have to move your character. And when you move your character, it's not literally your characters walking around. You have to move the entire row or column on the grid that your character is standing on. So,
Oh
like,
wow.
imagine a sidewalk. You're standing on a segment of a sidewalk, but instead of taking a step to the next segment, the entire sidewalk shifts whenever you want to move. And that creates a very interesting dynamic, not only of just getting around the world, but also trying to fight bad guys.
Yeah,
Or
I'm watching the trailer right now. Just the movement mechanic is so unique.
yes, it is built-in puzzle game. There is no element of this that is not puzzle. You are constantly figuring out how to get your character somewhere, which is unlike most games where you're like, okay, I figured out a puzzle, that's done, let me walk to the next place and figure out a puzzle. Everything here is puzzle. Even the combat, which the first boss is so funny, and it's basically the first boss in Demon Souls.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, oh, I love this reference, but you have to figure out how to move the boss in such a way that you can damage them.
Oh,
So
you're
it's
moving the
like,
boss.
yes.
That's
So
cool.
you're not taking the action to them. You're literally shifting the boss around to get them in a place where they can be vulnerable. And and it's really funny. It's got really poignant commentary. One of the first places that you visit is a village that is essentially overtaken by um, technology and social media. So, like, no one leaves their house anymore because they can get anything they want dropped off
Yeah.
via their birds. Like, it's essentially Twitter. Like, they only talk to people that way, and they only get deliveries via, like, what's essentially Amazon.
Hmm.
So, like, you have to figure out how to get everyone out of their houses in order to get to the next area, but no one wants to leave. And then, of course, the stand-in evil genius technology person is actually kind of trying to help you, which is weird. Um, but yeah, it's just things like that. It's like, oh, that hits a little too close to home with what you're saying here, and then they'll turn around and say something really silly. And then on top of all of that, again, with all of these beautiful games, you have this sort of post-impressionistic art style, which if you are not watching your character too closely, you should look in the background because these little vignettes are popping up as you walk around and you're getting a sense of what is happening and how the character is feeling based on the art that is popping up in the background.
Ooh, I like
It's
that.
it's really cool. I think a lot of people probably miss it because you are so laser focused on like trying
Yeah.
to figure out how to move your character. But yeah.
Well, if that sounds up your alley, it's on sale until August 8th. It is normally $20, is 10% off to $18. So slight discount, but hey, better than nothing, right?
Uh-huh.
But yeah, available now for Switch and I think Steam. But
Yes.
okay, and looks like there's 2-player. Do you know anything about that?
I haven't actually played any of the two-player stuff, so I can't speak to that.
Okay,
But
no
I
worries.
can only imagine that that would be wild.
Yeah, if you're both moving the tiles,
Mm-hmm.
goodness, yeah, just and it's an entrancing trailer of like being able to watch like her just moving all the tiles around and like there's one scene where she like breaks somebody's ladder
Yeah.
and like
It
yeah.
reminds me, and I said this, I had a little gameplay up of it. Um, Her predicament, the main character named Gemma, is in her original village, kind of treated like the 90s Hercules. If you remember that movie, he's just like, he's so strong, he can't help but like hurting people. Like, it's sort of the same thing. No one else has this problem of like everything moves with them, it's just her. So she can't help getting other people in her, hurting people in her path because that's how the world moves around her.
Well, that's available now on Switch if you want to check that out. Again, it's on sale till August 8th. Got 2 more here, Jill.
I'm ready.
Thank goodness you're here. Also, it's the
Haha.
game that we're going to talk about.
This might be the funniest game I've played, and I did watch
Ever?
maybe this year.
Okay.
Um,
What's the funniest game you've ever played?
Ever played? I don't know. Now that I'm thinking of this game, this might be it. But like I've played some
Wow.
really silly, absurd games, so probably something along those lines. But I mean, thank goodness you're here is up on the absurdity list. It is a slap former. This is how they explain it. Um, it's kind of a platformer. It's you go around and you only have two basic buttons. You have jump and you have hit. You
Jump and not jump.
jump and slap, essentially. Everything is an innuendo. Everything is double entendre. Everything is a gag. There are visual gags stuffed in every single corner. Um, the very first gag that they hit you with, this is an extremely British game. You've got like Monty Python vibes, but in a hand drawn, like silly cartoon. 100%. That's what the vibes are. The first gag that they pull uh, is against you, the player. It's hilarious.
How dare they?
They ask you in sort of a northern English dialect without pulling any punches a question. And if you know how to answer that question correctly in the dialect, you can select that option. But for an American like me, I'm like, what did you say? Like, that was the option I picked. So, what that means, if you don't know what that dialect is asking you, they give you captions. Like, they don't ask you, do you want captions or not? They literally just, can you understand what I'm saying right now? No? Okay, you get captions. And they don't really give you an option.
I need to look up this game.
It
I
is so good. Um, Everything is just, it is a blend of absurdity, hilariousness, and just absolute, just okay, let's go with it. Why not? That sort of attitude, because you are a salesman and you're there for an important meeting and you've got a couple of hours before your important meeting starts. So you're just walking around this town which needs your help. So in every single scene you walk into, every little tiny like location, someone will notice you and go, "Thank goodness you're here." And some sort of problem will be presented to you and you have to figure out how to help them in some way. And you're just sort of like, oh, okay, why not? Um it's literally the most bizarre thing. Like one of my favorite things, being a huge nerd, I went to college for what's essentially ancient Rome. Walking,
So your Roman Empire.
yeah, every day. I walked out of a building and the building's got this like Latin inscription that is supposed to look all neat and stuff. But having some idea of how to read Latin, I just looked at it and laughed because it essentially says strong in arm, thick in head. And I'm like, that's hilarious. No one is going to know that. Who is going to be able to interpret that immediately? But
Well,
it's
you
in there.
apparently.
Yeah, it's in there for people like me. So you've got all these, like, I got an achievement that was beautiful rat music. And you have to figure out what that means, right? Um, I had this horrible fever dream where I was in the middle of meat and meat was telling me its horrific stories of how it got there.
Oh
And
no.
it was just like, this is terrifying. And then you have to, like, there's a large man that's gotten his hand stuck in a grate and you have to get butter to help him out. And it's just so many funny, funny things are happening that are played a lot of the time just really straight so that you don't know that they're supposed to be funny, which makes it funnier. And the fact that it's just a lovely game to look at as well.
I'm just looking at some of the screenshots and like some of like the brands that are in the
Hmm.
background.
Visual gags everywhere.
There's
It's
a
really
sign
funny.
for normal milk
Yep,
that you
totally
can.
normal milk. Don't worry about it.
I mean, it's like what is the water that they sell some places where it's like perfectly
100%
safe
water.
water or
Yeah.
something like that. I'm just like, that seems like maybe not perfectly safe water. It sounds like something that a not perfectly safe water would call itself.
Yeah. You could stop in any location and try for hours to kind of decode all of the humor that's going on in the background, in what people are doing, like the double entendres in just like, I don't even understand some of them because I don't understand English slang. So one of my favorite double entendres comes from a character who is breaking that thing where you break the innuendo by saying what it actually is, which
Yeah.
made me laugh because I'm like, I didn't even know that was none like, but really funny, very silly, but also like very genuine and endearing because you have this character who's just like ready to help anyone he comes across and isn't complaining and is just like, okay, we'll do it.
So it seems like I don't know, like British humor has never really landed for me, like overtly British humor. Like obviously, there's some things that are absolutely hilarious that to me, but like the really, really like British stuff has sometimes struggled to find its mark with me. So I'm hoping that this one might be the type that does hit. I don't know.
I think it might just because the game's two major mechanics is jump and slap. So
Yes, we've been over this, Jill.
so there's not like a huge amount of like terribly like repressed English folds of understanding and meaning. You know, you're going up to a thick person and slapping them on the bum. You know, there is some of that humor going on.
Gotta love a good bum slap in a
This
video
game
game.
certainly does.
Well, from that game, we're going to transition to the final game. We're going to take us home here, Jill. The Garden
The
Path.
garden path might
Well,
be
I don't know anything about this
spiritually,
game, so
it
that's
might
why
be
I.
the most opposite to the game we've just been talking about. Um, it reminds me a lot of children's stories uh, when I was a child, sort of in the where the wild things are
Hmm.
realm, where you have these fantastical things and it's got this hazy, beautiful fairy tale look to it. And again, a very genuine, open kind of game. Maybe a lot like Snufkin is another really good point to it, a game that came out earlier this year. But it's not like keeping you safe from anything. You know, you're out there. It talks about how certain plants can harm you and how you deal with that. And it kind of feels like it's not, but it kind of feels like a survival game
Mm.
in that you have this sort of open space that you are going towards and you have objectives, but it all is very self assigned to like what you are interested in. So for me in particular, one of my first goals was I figured out that I could brew tea. And I'm like, I need to brew some tea. That's got to be number one priority for me. So then I had to go around and find out how this game kind of works. And it is so interesting that the developers talk about this game as a game that you should dip your toes into, in and out. You should not be playing this game for hours on end. You should, at the end of the day, if you need to wind down and relax and feel like you're in this world that is comforting and free and wild, but also cozy and charming, and then you jump out. It is meant to be a short period of time game. You run into characters throughout, and they also give you little objectives. I've run into Augustus, who is adorable. He's a giant bear, uh, but he's like that kid from Up, who's trying to get all of his merit badges. So
Okay.
he's super into like his ranger handbook and what it says, and he's trying to get tools that help you, so you can start to garden or you can start to um, get other different types of clippings. So it's really up to you what you want to do. I've also uncovered the star system. If it's kind of like getting an achievement pop up on the screen,
Hmm.
but instead of having that connected to the platform, in it connects in game with stars in the sky. So
Oh,
anytime you do something, so the first time I brewed tea, a star appeared, and I don't know exactly what I can do with them, but I have a star for finding and helping out Augustus. I have a star for finding a particular landmark. And at one point, you go to the stars and it says connect. So I'm guessing at some point you're going to make constellations and that's going to do something, maybe skill.
wow. I like that.
Yeah, it's a really lovely system. And it is just a game to be in, to exist in, to feel cozy and comforted and a little wild in. I
Well,
love that.
that's definitely going on my list. I do like what you were talking about where it's like designed for like shorter play sessions. It's like, oh, I'm just going to hop on for like 10, 20, 30 minutes and then
Yeah.
be done. It's not like a marathon situation. I like that a lot. Because there's so many games where it's like, you need to be playing this for like at least 2 hours at a time or you're not going to get like the full experience. You're not going to be able
Right.
to get into the groove of it.
Or you're gonna be behind everybody else
Oh,
who's
God.
jumping in for 5 hours a night. Yeah.
So that's available now on Switch. I also I wanted to ask you about one game that's not confirmed to come to Switch,
Okay.
but it has piqued my interest hardcore. That is UFO 50.
Oh, yeah.
It's coming to Steam on September 18th, but I would be shocked if it does not come to Switch by the end of this year.
Yeah. I want this to come to everything, essentially.
So
Uh,
tell people what it is. It's basically like, I mean, I'll assist here, and then you fill in the
okay.
blanks here. So basically, it's a bunch of like indie developers coming together. So like the developers behind Spelunky and
Mhm.
Downwell and all these other like indie games, like hit indie games, not just like
Yes.
random people. Hit indie games are coming together, and they're making basically a fake game catalog for a fake video game system.
Yeah.
And it's like the UFO, and it's like almost like Atari 50, which I've sung the praises of so many times on this podcast, where it's like, oh, well, this is the UFO, and you're playing like the greatest hits from the UFO game system. It's a system that doesn't exist, but they're all like in like the NES, SNES style, and they've created like full-fledged games. So like there's like a platformer and there's a literal RPG, full-length RPG in there, and there are 50 games in this package,
Yeah.
50 completely new games that are designed to look like retro games. from like these renowned indie creators, and I knew this would be on your radar just given like
It's
the
so
pedigree
good.
behind it.
I mean, anybody who went to Summer Game Fest and checked this game out was talking about it.
Hmm.
And it was so interesting to talk to other people about it because we had all chosen different games. And
Oh, that's so
you
cool.
you talked about the RPG, but it's like which RPG? Because some people played like a futuristic stargazing RPG, whereas I had like tried out the Western Cowboy RPG. And I was like, I could literally play this game. This is a full RPG game that has a story, and I want to pick up skills, and I need to get my party together and just like discover and like destroy bad guys and discover the world. But there was also everybody talked about playing a golf game, and I didn't figure it out until much later. Everyone was talking about a different golf game.
What?
Yeah, there was
Oh
at
my
least
god.
3 that I clocked. There was one
And
that was kind of futuristic, one that was kind of top-down Zelda, and then one that was kind of normalish golf. And it's just like, "Oh, cool." Like, this is how these conversations are gonna unwrap when this game comes out. People are going to be talking about the games they've chosen to jump into. People are gonna
mhm.
have their favorites. People are gonna start connecting the dots as to what happened to this game, this meta game developer who is putting their collection out, and it like goes in order, and you can see like how uh the first title of a game that came out in like early 80s and the sequel that came out in like the 90s, how that changed and what that means, and why the changes might have been made. And it's like I'm very very interested to see how those connections come together. But besides that, it is just a collection of indie developers come together in collaboration to create a world of new games all in one game, and it's wild.
It is wild, and like I said, it's not announced for Switch yet, but I would be surprised if it didn't come to Switch.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, that it's not, or it's unfortunate that it's not available on Switch day one, at least as far as we know. But fingers crossed. And then before we wrap up, I did want to just give one quick programming note. I am going to be traveling yet again next week. So I'll be pre-recording an episode. I have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to be doing, but just so you know, no news probably in next week's episode unless something hits before I have to record it. But as always, I will catch up on the other side. So all the games that we've covered, aside from UFO 50, are available now on Switch. And Jill, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of All Things Nintendo and giving me so many more games to add to my wish list, as you always do.
Yeah, it's always so much fun to come on.
And thank you so much to everyone for listening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, throw All Things Nintendo a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. If you want to get any questions or comments in, you can get in touch with me at brian@allthingsnintendo.com. Hit me up on social media at Brian P. Shea, or leave a comment on the free All Things Nintendo Patreon page. And be sure to find All Things Nintendo on YouTube and subscribe to that channel. You can search for All Things Nintendo or visit at Brian P. Shea on YouTube. Jill, tell people about your online presence.
You can check out all the coverage for all of the games that we talked about today on the indieinformer.com. That's where everything goes. So if you want to check stuff out, that's the best place. But if you're looking to check out socials, I am at Finruin, Finruin, just for me. And if you're looking for the channel, it is at indie_informer.
That is our show for this week. Thank you again for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time.